shift it up a gear. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be showing you my 72 volt, 6,000 watt mid-drive mountain bike. This thing peaks at 6,000 watts. It is a full suspension. It has a ton of suspension travel, with some very premium components. This has got a RockShox boxer front fork, as well as a RockShox, I believe it's a Craze rear shock, and those are very high end.
And this is what we're going to be using to convert my mountain bike into an e-bike. This is the CYC X1 Pro Gen 4, and it is a 72 volt kit with the controller mounted underneath and this huge motor in the front. There's a chain that runs from the motor, and then a chain that runs from the back sprocket to your bike's cassette.
I got this thing as an incomplete frame and built it from a normal downhill mountain bike into a monster of a 50-mile-an-hour e-bike with torque sensors on the pedal and a throttle. This e-bike is a mid-drive, and it has a ton of torque and power. This thing only weighs, I believe, 70 pounds. I'll show you exactly in the video, but it is super lightweight. I bought my frame for this project super cheap from a website called Bike Island, which I will have a link down below. I'm not affiliated in any way, but I think that is one of the best ways for you to find a high-end frame for a cheap price. I paid $650 for this frame with the front suspension and rear suspension, but this frame was missing the derailleur hanger, which was not that easy to track down. I'm going to be showing you exactly how I built this bike from the frame up, including testing on the original 52 volt low power battery that I started with, and then moving up to this 72 volt 80 amp battery, outputting 6,000 watts at the peak. This is going to be a bit of an extended build guide video on this bike because I've been working on this for a few months, and instead of making a series, I'm putting it all into one video. I will have timestamps in the description if you want to skip to the riding portion of this video. But the next thing that's coming up is a full detailed build guide of how I built this thing. That way, if you want to do it, you have the tools to do it yourself. Let's get into it. We just got this custom rear wheel in. It's made with DT Swiss parts, which should be plenty strong to handle the forces that we're going to be putting at this bike. Step one is going to be mounting our direct mount handlebar.
This bike is a clone of a KHS downhill mountain bike, which is a $4,000 frame. This thing came in with no rear wheel, no derailleur hanger, as well as no rear brake. The only thing that was mounted to the frame was the suspension when I took it out of the box. Now you're going to mount our front brake caliper. The missing parts allowed me to get a great deal on this thing, and I wasn't worried about it since I was planning on sourcing my own parts for this build.
And now we're going to route the cable up here. So I'm going to put this on here.
This Shimano Dior XT front brake came with the bike.
Alright, hopefully this is a little bit easier to line up now that the cable won't be fighting us. Yeah, way easier. Shifter is on as well. Let's get the front brake disc onto this bike.
We have to remove the through axle's locking bolt first. And then the through axle unscrews from this side, and then we can pull it out of the bike. And our front wheel is now released, so we can remove that as well. I'm now attaching the 200mm front brake disc that came with the bike. Now the front wheel can go back on.
Now this only goes in one order, so this has to come in from this far side. And then this just threads in with the 6mm.
and we add a quick zip tie just to hold it out of the way.
I have a pile of new parts to put on this bike, so we're going to start with taking off this back wheel and getting that sorted.
The back axle just unscrews from one side and then pulls straight out. And then the rear wheel just lifts away. Make sure not to catch this on the derailleur.
The next thing that we're going to need to do is put on our new rear tire. We have these Michelin that are e-bike specific tires, and we're going to get it onto this rim.
I did film myself putting the tubeless tape on, but I ended up cutting it from this video since it failed on me and I did it incorrectly. But I did install the tire correctly.
Now that we have it like this, let's go get some sealant into this. We'll see if my tape job worked. We're going to take this original tubeless sealant. We're just going to give it a good shake. And we need about 4 ounces of fluid in the bottom of this. That's a little bit more than that, but that should work. And now we are going to rotate this so that the liquid is sitting inside of the part that we already beaded. Now that we got that down there, we just gotta pinch this up to get this beaded up here. So I don't have the correct adapter to inflate my tire at the moment, so we're going to go down to the bike shop in just a moment. But first, we're going to put our steel KMC cassette onto this bike, because I know I'm also going to need the tool to tighten this on. So let's see if this fits. Ran over to my local bike shop, Airline Cycles, and they filled up my tire with air, and it's holding good. They also tightened down this to the correct torque, so now I don't have to worry about this, because I did not have the tools to do either of those at the moment. I probably will pick those up sometime soon. Let's get our brake disc on.
This was a 200mm SRAM brake disc that I had to purchase since I didn't have one that came with the bike.
One complete e-bike rear wheel. I had installed the zoom brake here, but I decided against actually using it. So instead, we have a Magura MT5 4-piston brake that we are going to be replacing this zoom brake with. So let's start with removing the brake caliper.
This bike has cable routing anchors, so I'm just removing the old brake line from these predetermined spots and installing the new one in the same location. We have to take off the brake handle itself and then remove the brake line, that way we can feed it back down through the bike.
Magura MT05 going on the bike.
And this is the exact opposite of the process we just did. We just gotta screw this on and then run the line up to the handle. I appreciate that this bike already has these routes established because we're gonna attach the wires for our electrical system to the same spots. The brake hose on the Magura MT05s does come long so that you can trim it down 2 sides, so we're going to handle that later on.
I think it's time for us to try and get the rear wheel back on. Gonna pull these out, line this up. And then reattach our wheel. There we go.
Now that we basically have a full mountain bike, obviously there's still some work to be done, we are going to be taking off the cranks to start mounting the motor. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I have this tool that we're going to put onto this, and then this is to tighten this way, so we'll try the opposite to, there we go, release. Then this should just unscrew. And then we need to take our T-handled wrenches. Hey, how about that? First guess, what was this? The 5mm. And we're gonna loosen it. We'll loosen this one as well. Now, if I guess right, this should just like come off? Question mark? After consulting a lovely website called YouTube, I found that I need to release this plastic bit, and now this should just come off. And this should just slide off. Whoop! Sorry, I hit the camera. Yep, it just slides off. I have a feeling I'm going to have to take this and this off before I can pull it off. But we're going to flip the bike around because this bike has a chain guard. And I have a feeling I need to take that off as well. But we're going to start by removing these bolts in here. And one more in here. I think this all just pulls right on out now. Sweet. And since I don't want to lose anything, we're going to put everything into here. Now we're going to attempt to remove the bottom bracket. Okay. Cool. And then I think this just unthreads like that. Into the bag of bottom bracket bits. Looks like that is just a lock that goes into here, so I probably needed to take that off first. The threading should be opposite to the way the other one was, so let's see if we can... Oh. That was so tight on there. All right. And now this is removed. It is now time to test fit our motor. This is the CYC Pro Gen 4. This is a 6,000 watt mid-drive conversion kit with the controller, which is 72 volt, 80 amps, along with this big old motor, connected to a sprocket that then drives your bike chain. So this fits into our bottom bracket here. I'm not sure if this big gearing will clear our swing arm over here. So if it doesn't, we have a lower gearing kit, which we might swap into anyways, but for now we're gonna leave the one that came on the motor. So the first thing we gotta do to test fit this thing is take out these two bolts in the bottom. And then loosen this bolt. I guess we have to take this one out too. So that's just gonna swing away like that. Then this should just... Well, that's a bit of a problem. We're hitting on our swing arm linkage. Hey guys, this is Tyler editing the video.
And this next part, I'm gonna disassemble the whole motor, but it's actually not really necessary. I just had trouble fitting it initially. So you can probably get away with not doing all this work that I'm about to do, but if you want to see how to fully disassemble your CYC X1 Pro, this next part is for you. Let's get back to the video.
Well, unfortunately for me, it looks like my controller is hitting on where my suspension goes. So I'm gonna have to relocate the controller for this motor. Don't think that's a big issue. I just gotta figure out how to get to it. So I think I need to get this cover plate. Okay, those are both the same size. And then I think I just need to loosen this one a little bit. I'm gonna have to take this apart so much more. Okay. While me in the past disassembles this motor, I'm going to tell you that you don't have to do all this work. You can actually take the controller off. There are 4 bolts, 2 on the far side from the sprocket and 2 on the sprocket side. One is accessible through the chainring, and the second one you just have to take off the tensioner cover in the front, and it is right underneath the chain. This is going to have to be relocated somewhere else on the bike, so that we can fit the motor on. Now this should, in theory, go on like that. Does look like we will have clearance though, so I'm just gonna have to assemble that back together now. Well, I realized that I would need to shorten the chain to fit the other gearing, so we are just going to stick with the gearing that came on this bike originally for now. Assembling this back together is actually not as difficult as it looks. Once you have the motor chain aligned on the front sprocket, all you have to do is line up the bicycle chain sprocket and then put the bolt through the back. The order of the stack goes bicycle sprocket, and then spacer, and then motor sprocket, and then another spacer, and then cover plate, with the flathead side of the bolt in the back and the Allen key side of the bolt in the front. Once you have a couple bolts in the back holding the assembly together, you can reassemble the front chain cover. You may need to rotate the sprocket by hand to be able to access the back end of the bolts. That way you can effectively tighten them down and they don't just spin. You want to make sure these bolts are very tight because you're going to be putting a lot of power and stress on this assembly. Okay. Now we can take this, swing this up, slide this in, and then clamp on like that. When you swing this up, that's gonna go in between here. Then these screws are gonna come down and thread into there. Untightening this screw allows the mounting bracket to be adjusted to line up with the screw. After you have this lined up and tightened down a little bit, you can retighten that side screw. Before cranking down this first side, I want to attach the second side as well. That way I hold up the motor equally. And now I'm going to remove the front wheel so we can move over to the new tire setup. First, we have to let the air out of the tire, and then we have to break the bead. I'm doing that with these 3 spoons. That way it pops up a large section of the tire. These bike tires are flexible enough that you can just unbead the rest of it by hand.
That is not acceptable. We are going tubeless on this bike. That looks like tubeless tape. I tore into the tape on this wheel, so we are going to be pulling this off and putting new tape on.
I retaped my tire, and now we're just hand mounting this Michelin E-Wild e-bike tire that should give us very good traction when we're riding. This tire is even softer than the one we just took off, which will make it super sticky while we're riding, but these ones are high wear tires, so you will have to replace these more often than a regular tire. And we're just adding some sealant, and then we're buttoning up the rest of the seal. Front tire goes back on, and then we put our through axle back through the wheel. We crank this down real tight, and then we put in the bolt from the other side, which is the other part of this through axle. Now I'm just going to reconnect the controller to the X1 Pro. This is the X12 controller, and the wires are all color-coded and pretty easy to figure out. Then we just have to stuff these wires back in there, but we gotta make sure that the power lead as well as the speed sensor wire come up through the bracket. That way we can still access them with the controller on. There's 2 bolts on each side for the controller. One side's super easy to access. The other one is in between the sprocket and near the chain in the front guard. Make sure that you put it all back together tightly because this motor puts out a ton of torque. Next, we're going to insert the spline shaft. I'm just adding some blue grease, and then you have to make sure that the teeth line up. You might have to pull it out and put it back in and twist it just a little bit a couple times until it slides in smoothly. You don't want to force this part. It should slide in pretty easily.
And then back over on this side of the bike, we just have to add this. I'm going to take one of my crank arms and go over on this side and put it on just enough that I can hold. So I can hold the opposite side while I tighten this on. A little something like that. And we just got to go in and tighten this. And then our crank arms. I have the other one positioned to be straight up and down on the other side. So this one will just go on. Once those are positioned on, you just take one of these and this should just thread into here. Okay, and let's do the same on the other side. Next up, we're going to be connecting our speed sensor. This is just going to plug in to this cable that I routed up like this. So we got an arrow on this side, we have an arrow on this side, and that just pops on just like that. I'm going to put a little bit of 3M tape on here, and then we're going to use zip ties through these little gaps here. This, we're just going to put onto it. So we'll stick it onto the underside like that. And then we take 2 zip ties and run them down through here. And zip tie 2. And then this magnet goes onto the wheel. With the magnet mounted to the spoke, when the wheel spins, it will pass over the sensor and tell the controller exactly how fast the wheel is spinning. Make sure it's pretty tightly on there. You don't want that thing flying off while you're riding fast. And very importantly, we got to make sure that this cable stays out of the way. So we're going to use 2 zip ties and attach it to this cable
that's already on the bike. Next, we are adding our screen onto the bike. I'm just gonna loosen up these. One thing to be mindful when you're doing this part is that the captive nuts on the inside of the walls of the plastic can fall out, so you want to make sure that those don't, or your bolts will not tighten back down while it's on the bike. So next thing we're going to do is mount our settings button. We're just going to put this over here for now. I do have a quarter twist throttle for this bike, but I don't really like the one that came with the kit, so I bought this thumb throttle on Amazon. We're going to mount it on the left side because the right side is already pretty complicated with the brakes and the shifting. So I got to take some stuff off and let's get this on. While I did like the clean aesthetics of this thumb throttle, I ended up switching back to the quarter twist throttle just because when you are riding hard, it's pretty hard to keep a constant speed with the thumb throttle over terrain. And now we're going to start plugging in the wiring harness. First, we're going to start with this. Yellow is our throttle. There is a notch and arrows pointing to the way you want to plug it in. You want to make sure you do that correctly so you don't bend the little tiny pins that are inside. So that is now attached. We have our display. Same deal. Plugged in simply. And then I'm just going to run this through here. Again, all of this extra cable is from my Magura brake. I need to shorten that still, which we'll do shortly. But this just runs through here. And then this will just run alongside the rest of these cables down to this, which is the main harness. And we're going to plug that in. Then we just need to cable manage this and attach a battery to this. All right, let's get busy with some zip ties. And then I think the last thing I need to do is put on my pedals.
It is now time to try out my e-bike conversion. I did end up swapping the gearing over just the front tooth. We went to 63 tooth instead of the 70 tooth, and we're still running 40 tooth in the back. We have the 52 volt, 15.6 amp hour, 35 amp max battery on it. And we're gonna go take this for a test drive. This one though is not full power at the moment. I have it tuned for about 1700 watts max. There we go. Bump it up to level 1 to start with. The road is feeling mighty soft already. We're already skipping gears, which, you know, is great. We're on power level 2 right now. And yeah, our gears are not liking this. But the bike seems to be feeling pretty good. And we are still skipping a bunch of gears. Nope, does not like that gear. See if we can go maybe up 2. My sprocket does not seem all too happy with what's happening to it.
My choices in driveline components was not holding up to the 1800 watts, and we need to make sure that this is working properly before we throw 72 volts and 6,000 watts at it. But luckily, CYC makes just the thing for it, the heavy-duty drivetrain. I had my local bicycle shop swap over the kit onto the bike because I was quite busy. This kit comes with a heavy-duty cassette, a derailleur, and a shifter, as well as a hub, but we did not use the hub. Now let me show you a little bit of what this bike is capable of doing at 52 volts, 1800 watts, before we move over to the 72 volt, 6000 watt version.
First, we got to make sure the bike is working properly at the power levels it is at. And remember to hit that subscribe button down below. So let me shift down to the lowest gear and give you a little example of what makes this bike special. So hit my thumb throttle. We can shift through the gears and just rip. And the suspension on this bike is absolutely insane. So the speedometer on this bike is not accurate. It actually reads significantly lower than what this bike is doing at the moment. I just haven't gone into the settings and corrected the wheel size. But I know what you guys are all here for. You guys want to see this thing ripping. Obviously, I wouldn't go this fast if there were people on the trail, but when we have it to ourselves, we can just hit it. Before we go on this last ride on 72 volts, I want to show you some modifications that I did off camera. We switched to a Cloud 9 seat. We added fenders to the front and rear. We are using Velcro straps to hold on our battery, but we also fashioned a hard guard out of this top part is from a 50cc scooter that I used to have. And I just cut some slots so it straps on here. And then we have a Talaria front fender that kind of wraps around the motor. I did trim some slots into it. Yes, it could be a little bit cleaner, but it will keep our battery safe. We also added this light bar, which is really, really bright and has its own battery, so it doesn't need to be plumbed into the bike. We have the 72 volt battery mounted to the CYC X1 Pro Gen 4 converted downhill mountain bike. The suspension feels great. The power is there. We are on the biggest tooth sprocket that is available for this. So what that allows us to do is drop some gears and then get pretty savage acceleration. And then we can shift gears. Oh, that's the wrong way, hold on. And as you can tell, we get some pretty incredible speed and acceleration out of this thing. And no, this thing is not your average mountain bike. This thing truly is special, but today's the 4th of July, so we have to be extra careful. There's gonna be more people on the trail than usual. You can see the torque sensor feels really good on this bike, even at 72 volts. We are in the highest speed gear. And you can see that I can still keep up with pedaling at like 25, 30 miles an hour, which is great for trails like this where you need to act like a normal bike. We actually have 4,000 watts enabled on the pedal assist, so like if I push really hard, you can see it boosts us pretty hard. Now as we go through this section, you can see the suspension doing a ton of work. Even on pedal assist, we're able to do like 30, but we get on throttle. And this one we don't have scary torque, but we have incredible speed. This motor can rotate up to 11,000 RPM, I believe. So we're only getting into a fraction of the speed this thing is capable of. If I kick it down here, you can see that we gain even more acceleration, which is a little terrifying on this bike because this thing only weighs 70 pounds. So it feels so light and it's got so much suspension travel that like when you get on it, the whole rear end literally compresses with the amount of torque that this motor is pumping through it. The CYC heavy duty drivetrain does its job very well and allows you to shift. Obviously you don't want to shift under power, you will break your chain, the bike chain. But as long as you let off the power, shift, make sure it's in gear, and then switch, it will have no problem ripping, kind of like a dirt bike. So if I drop 1, 2, that's me easing on the throttle. Like, you can get the idea of what this thing might be like if I just held it wide open, shifted up a gear. I have clocked this thing doing 50 miles an hour with the shorter gearing, and with this gearing it will go much faster. But honestly, I am literally too scared to really get on the throttle of this thing. I have had some reliability issues with this bike in my testing. My stock chain tensioner was way too tight and was actually causing the motor to bind up, so I had to fix that. And then once we had that good, I brought it out for some test rides. It was great. We brought it on this group ride out in New York, and if you want to join us on some of those group rides, join the Connecticut e-bike owners Facebook group. It's run by Chris over at Crisscross, and he organizes many of these rides for our community to get together and show off our bikes. I brought this thing with me, and it did great on the trip, but when I got back, both of my tires were flat, so that was my fault. I didn't do the tape right, so I'm running a tubeless setup. But we have a nice open patch, so let me just show you a little bit of what this thing's capable of. I'm like half throttle, seriously. I'm not going any faster than that. At least not without gear on. Maybe if I'm all suited up, I'll get this thing up and see what the true top speed is, but from my rough estimations, I really think this thing is a 60 plus a mile an hour mountain bike, which is insane considering this bike only weighs 70 pounds. You heard me right. This thing weighs 70 pounds. We got the 72 volt, 15 amp hour, 80 amp continuous battery, all hooked up. CYC heavy duty driveline here. And like I said, we're in this big gear. This thing makes it go real fast. This one is too much torque. I can't even use it really. So the 5 speeds are great on this. Especially if you're pedaling, you're gonna want the big sprocket. Trust me. You get on this bike, it sinks down like literally a couple inches because of how much suspension it has. It's supposed to do that, by the way. That's by design. But see, the torque sensor again, I only have the torque sensor set to 4,000 watts. I have the throttle set to 6,000 watts. You can set those independently on this bike, but yeah, guys, I really don't want to rip it too fast on the trail. I don't fully trust the bike. This thing is super efficient, though. We did 30 miles and we ended, I think, 78 volts, starting at 83. So we dropped like 5 volts in 30 miles. That is with pedaling. I was adding some of my own power. But we did make some high-speed pulls, and we did probably a solid 4 or 5 miles at 30 plus miles an hour on this thing. Yeah, this thing is so silky smooth. This front suspension has 200 millimeters of travel, and I think the rear is close to the same, which is absolutely insane. But yeah, let me just show you what this thing's like a little bit on throttle. And this is the least torquey gear in the highest top speed one. As you can see, we barely have to get onto the throttle. My screen is reading low, by the way. It's about 3 miles an hour faster than what it says on there, usually. Yeah, this thing is faster than I really want to be going on the trails that I ride, really. It's pretty insane. It's definitely got e-moto power. This is way beyond just normal e-bike power. I actually find that if I shift down in gear, I get a little bit more playful of a bike. Like, yeah, this thing's freaking intense, man. I promise you that's faster than 30 miles an hour. I know what the screen says, but it really is. This thing's insanely fast, and I've never really gotten it past like half throttle, at least on full power. I don't really think it'll hold up on full power though for long periods of time. This thing's really meant to be run at like 2,000 watts normally. And that torque sensor, when you put your legs into it, it's really good. Non-camera, this thing sounds super loud, and if you are really ripping on throttle, it is, but if you're using the pedal assist, it really doesn't sound out of the place for an e-bike. I really love this thing. This thing's basically my dream bike. It's perfect. I wish I trusted it a little bit more, and I hope it'll be a little bit more reliable for me in the future, but there's really nothing quite like this. You get the thrill of like a mid-drive Sur-Ron or Talaria. You get the absolute beauty and comfort of a torque-sensing electric mountain bike. It's lightweight. You don't have any weight in the wheels, so like coming off of stuff, it doesn't feel rough, literally ever. I mean, like, if I was out here on my Talaria, I'd be getting a whole lot of attention, but this thing really doesn't. That's just easing into the throttle. You can really see how much power this thing truly has. It's crazy. You guys will definitely be seeing more of this bike on my channel because I'm super happy with this thing. This thing's my masterpiece. Yeah, it's a perfect mix though. You get exercise, you get a bike that rips when you want it to, you get gears. You can choose if you wanna, you know, push hard, make this thing really pull. Or you can throttle it. And without turning down any of the settings, you can come up to these like tight corridors or people, and this thing is more than manageable at low speeds, unlike a lot of powerful bikes that just feel like they want to kill you. I don't recommend building one of these bikes if you are not willing to work on it yourself. It's going to be incredibly expensive. Not that this thing's cheap, even if you build it yourself, but this thing has needed more troubleshooting than any of my other bikes. But it really delivers a performance level in a class that you can't really buy. Well, I guess you can buy the Benell, but this thing has way better suspension. It might not be as robust, but I think this thing's almost perfect.
Before I give my closing thoughts, I just want to show you guys a little bit of this thing cruising at speed. I'm not going to talk in this part, so you can skip ahead to this timestamp if you don't want to watch this. But it's pretty fun cruising at 40 on this thing.
Before we talk about if this bike is worth building or not, let's talk about the price. I got the frame for $650, missing the rear wheel, brake, and derailleur hanger, which was quite the deal. This is like a multiple $1,000 frame because it's a clone of a KHS 7500. The motor kit itself is $1,250. This heavy-duty cassette, which in my opinion is 100% necessary, is $300 and I believe $80. The battery that I have is from Electrocycle Garage, I believe, and retails for $800. I got mine used locally for $550. And then we also have the miscellaneous parts like the Magura brake, which was $70, the SRAM disc, which was, I believe, $50. I'll have the price of this bike listed up on the screen. That way I'm not inaccurate. This thing does deliver a top tier of performance, but like I said, you have to be pretty gentle on it. My last ride when I was getting B-roll, I actually bent my derailleur because I jammed up this chain so bad in the chain ring. It really pulled super hard on this. I don't think I've ever tangled a chain this badly. What did I even do? Holy shit. I don't even understand what happened. So you have to be very sympathetic to the mechanics of your bike if you are going to build one of these. But I do still highly recommend this. There's nothing quite like the experience that this bike gives you. Thank you so much for tuning into my video. And soon we're going to have a video on my electric street bike. So you want to stay subscribed for that. But I will catch you on the next one. Bye now.